Welcome to This Is You, the podcast. As our journeys unfold, so do our identities. What makes you, you? This podcast explores how different life experiences, concepts, or themes like friendship, religion, loneliness impact how we see ourselves and the world. Join me on this journey as we talk to new guests and learn about their life experiences, reflect on our own, and see what it means for all of us going forward. Your journey to learn more begins now. Becky Hellwig is a mom of 3 who is a self-professed city girl. Growing up and raised in Silicon Valley, the world of Google and all sorts of other tech startups, she was often found blogging and helping other people navigate the city who would come by for a visit. For Becky, community was all about connecting with people, helping them find a way to belong, and going to fancy events dressed up to the nines. About 3 years ago, Becky moved to a rural town in Germany, where she left behind everything she was used to for a completely different environment. In rural Germany, there were no places to go. People didn't dress up, and she struggled to find a place where she belonged. In this story, Becky describes her life in Silicon Valley before she left for rural Germany and her initial experiences when she arrived in Germany.
I would always go for walks with the kids, or we'd go to the YMCA. They have free childcare for like 90 minutes. You can go there, have a shower, hang out, exercise. So I would do that, and then the kids would do childcare. I was blogging a lot because my thing is, who are the people around you? In Silicon Valley, everybody comes from everywhere. Since I was local, everybody was excited. But what I loved is every third person, my friends were from China. We're not like second generation, but like first generation. From Vietnam, from Europe, from Sweden, from South America, from Iran, from Iraq, from everywhere. So I would open my house and say, hey, ladies, bring your 2 babies that get into everything. We have a party at Becky's house. Or Tuesday nights, I would get together with my friends because the kids go to bed at 7. My husband would play badminton every Tuesday, so it was great. I would say, ladies, come over after 7 o'clock. I will have the beer, the wine, and bring your laptops, whatever you're working on. We can work together at the kitchen table. So that was always great.
Your house was like a co-working space.
Yeah.
Where like people could come and hang out and work together. And I think what I'm also hearing is that there was a big social aspect to what you were doing. Like you really liked connecting with people, and the variety of the types of people that you were able to connect with was really important to you.
Yes. And one of my great friends, Trisha Leeper, she is a photographer for Getty Images, and she's always going to these great parties and events. And she's like, Becky, you're on the media list too. I said, oh, now I am.
Oh, exciting.
So I would say, okay, great. I would always go to the same events. Mm-hmm. So I would cover as online media, and she would cover as working for Getty. So that was always a highlight. And one thing I loved is thrift shopping. I have this amazing gold Oscar dress. So when I win the Oscars for my short film or something, I will fit into it and I will wear it. I think it weighs like 20 pounds.
Wow.
But it cost like $20, and it fit me perfectly when I bought it. Perfect. And so I said, since it fit me perfect, I'm not going to let it stay there for somebody else.
Yeah.
Take it home. So my life there, you always dressed up. You put on makeup. You put on your heels. You look nice. Then you go to Starbucks just because you can. You can go shopping on Sunday. For example, my husband, he likes windsurfing. So he would go windsurfing on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. And then Saturday afternoon, evening, I would be out for like work-related projects. So that was cool. So we had our thing going. And plus, my sisters were there, so I can just pop into their house or pop into a friend's house and say, hey, let me sit on your couch for 2 hours while my kids play with your animals.
You had community.
I had community.
Right. And also, I think the other thing I'm hearing when you talk about like being able to go to these events and dressing up and like just being in the thick of things. knowing what's going on, telling people about what's going on, especially with blogging and everything else. And you're blogging in a place that a lot of people are coming to visit to, and you were mentioning you're local. So you can really explain, like, what is it like to actually come to that city, the places they should check out. And that was a big part of your identity at that time, right? In your work, but also in your lifestyle, the availability of doing those things. And kind of every single day, or having something that you're looking forward to or excited about doing that day.
Yeah, and it's funny because my husband always says, Becky, are you having a party again? I'm like, dude, what? What's a party? I'm just having the girls over. He goes, more than two girls over, I consider it a party. And I'm like, okay, dude, you're awesome. I love you. Sure, it's a party every day at my house. So, yeah, and I also like to make my house a place where they can come and hang out and just kind of kick back and relax because sometimes husbands were traveling everywhere, or they're like, okay, where's a go-to place? First come over. And I always say, if you can't drive or whatever, let me know. I have a minivan. I fit everybody. Let's go on back to the That was fun.
It seems like, too, that you just want to connect with people, especially to connecting with people who may not have other people to connect with, right? Because you mentioned people who were new to the country or didn't really know where to go for stuff. It seems like, anyway, you were sort of actively seeking people out that you could play a support sort of role to help them acclimatize.
Well, because my background is nonprofit, community relations, vulnerable populations, even though they're not vulnerable. But I always like to say, okay, you're new to the area, let's get you plugged in and let's have you thrive in society.
Do you think that knack or that tendency comes from the work that you were doing, or does it come from how you were brought up, or like the environment that you grew up in? Or is it both?
Since we're being totally honest, maybe it's because I'm the young one in the family, or, I just didn't want people to be forgotten because it sounds funny. I had this dream when I was, I think, 9. I dreamt that my mom was driving away without me. In my dream, I saw the lights, it was at night. And so I opened the door, got up, ran down the street. It's funny because my mom was just going to Toys R Us without me.
Oh,
Those kind of things, right? It's not like, oh, I'm forgotten. But in high school, I was always the misfit, always trying to find the piece where I belonged or my peeps. And I had a few, but it wasn't like, oh, everybody come to my house, or you're everybody's best buddy. You're just kind of weaving in and out of different community circles. And I think that's okay. But it was never like I had the bestie. Yeah.
It sounds like you were looking for community when you were growing up, and you didn't want to be forgotten or sort of left out or whatever the case was. And as you sort of navigated high school, and you were trying to figure out where you belonged or you felt like you connected.
Yeah, to find the place where I can thrive and say, okay, this is who I am, this is where I am, and this is where I'm growing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because I was always sort of loud, but when I was in school, like elementary school, I was really shy and I was very introverted at the time. I found it really difficult to share how I was feeling or thinking. And so as I sort of worked through that shyness, I would also gravitate towards people who I felt were like, I could see myself in them. Like they're also feeling shy or nervous or, wanting to connect with somebody. And so I would often approach people like that because I knew what it was like to be in their shoes, and I wanted to help them navigate better than I navigated at that time. And I think a lot of people who end up in helping professions end up in them because they're coming from a place where they know what it's like to be on the other side, and they want to then help other people navigate that process.
Exactly.
Right? So you sort of became, over time, through your work experiences, but also this desire to make community, you pursued something that allowed you to connect with lots of people. And so you live in Germany now, in rural Germany. So what prompted the move? And then what were those initial days like, your first reaction?
Yeah, sure. So we always envisioned us moving to Germany when the kids were a little older, but we wanted to have a secure job because in Silicon Valley, if you lose your job, you might be boom right away, you get another job, or you have to wait 2 years, and then, you have to pay for health insurance. If you don't have a job and you have family, it's like $2,000 a month. And if you can't afford $2,000 a month, you have to sell your house and things like that. Because otherwise, they're not going to help you because you have property. And so my husband's dad doesn't speak English. They're getting older. And so he said, okay, if we're going to move to Germany, it'd be now, this 3 years ago, because the language is hard, right? And then if we waited 2 more years for my oldest, then it's like we'd have to go to an international school, and that's a lot of money. And then would we even get a job where there's an international school? So those are kind of things we're thinking. So 2 years later, me and my husband come to this area. So it's Chemnitz. I came out here with my white blonde hair, platinum blonde, my leopard print jacket, and we saw a castle just outside of the Chemnitz city. Chemnitz has about 250,000 people. And I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm like, this area is like a little fairy tale, village. I'm like, okay, it's good. There's people, there's touristy. I can do this. Then my husband said, no, Becky, it's down the mountain and through the woods and over the mountain again. I'm like,
oh no.
And it wasn't jet lag, but a tear started coming down my face. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Becky couldn't believe where she had landed. Leaving Silicon Valley for rural Germany, she found the transition difficult, and 3 months in, she felt her first intense culture shock. It actually occurred when Becky visited the city in Germany, and all of a sudden felt lighter and more at peace. She could feel community. She felt like she belonged, but this was in the city, and she currently lived in the village. Then panic. Now, her landlord had offered them the option of renting for 6 months to see if they liked being in the village before fully committing, and 3 months had already passed, so she had 3 months left to find a place in the city, and she felt defeated. While praying one day, she asked God to help her find why she was here, and one day it came to her. A few years ago, before she left, she had thought, even if there's one person I can help in Germany, then it'll be worth it to go. Maybe this was her chance to find that one person, even if that one person was in the village. Have you found that one person? Right? Because I think the reason you were saying that was because you wanted to feel needed and have a place where you belonged. And yes, some of the belonging I think for you relates to being amongst the city, right? And what comes with being in a city. But it's also exposure to people and feeling like there's something for you to do here. There's a purpose for why you're here. And not having a purpose or feeling like you're not connecting with anyone or there aren't opportunities to connect makes you really question your purpose. And I feel like that's important for you.
No, it is. And check this out. I think about 2 months later, one lady, she was like, Becky, I think you're here just for me. I started crying because she kind of has the same vibe as my mom. My mom is very spiritual. She talks about pray for peace. And so I understand this lady. And she goes, no, but you don't understand. I have no friends. And then since we don't have Starbucks here in our village, we have the local bakery to sit down and find community at the bakery.
Yeah.
Then I connected with the lady that works there. And she said, Becky, I think you're here just for me. I'm like, oh my gosh. Why do you say that? Well, because I had a great friend, but she moved away and we had a falling out for some reason. Her eyes were tearing up. And just those kind of things. Yeah, so, needing the people bit, yeah, I totally get that. The funny thing is, the same time we moved from California, there was a family that moved from Virginia to our small village. The wife is from the village. And they were here the same reason why we came back to Germany, to be here, because they have a great education system. And they have 2 kids, same age as my oldest kid. And it's hilarious, same time. So me and her husband, we always say, okay, whenever we need support, we'll always go to each other's homes and have a drink.
Yep.
And we always share not the war stories of German-American culture.
You have someone you can relate to, right? Who gets it. Because he's also sort of a fish out of water.
Yeah.
Right? Like similar to you. Whereas both your spouse and his spouse were native to Germany, right? They had experience living in Germany. And for them, even if there's an adjustment to be back, it's not like it's unfamiliar. Yeah. Whereas for the two of you, it's unfamiliar and strange to adjust. It takes time to adjust anywhere, but you're sort of being hit with a lot of different things at the same time. So when you made friends with this person who, you were her shining light, did that shift things for you as well? And did you also feel connected?
Yeah, I did. It was good because I said, hey, this is my new buddy.
So there were some pockets, but no real sense of purpose per se at that point.
Here, you're like a fish out of water, or you feel like you're in a fishbowl because you just want to swim out of the fishbowl, but you can't. Then you have to find out, okay, I can't drive to the local Starbucks. That's not part of the culture. It's not exciting per se here, so you can't say, oh, you're going to this event. It's not Silicon Valley. It is rural area, and you have to find out, okay, what are my hobbies? What do I like to do? What do I don't like to do? What am I willing to do? What I'm not willing to do? That took a while. After everything's gone, because when you're shaped by your culture, your community, when it's all gone, who are you? That's when you find out who you really are and what you like to do. One thing that was really good that helped with my transition, I told my husband, hey, I need my family. So when we first moved here, that October, I flew out to Tennessee for 10 days to see my mom, and I visited Nashville and Graceland. Graceland was on my bucket list since I was 13 years old, and now I'm 43.
So on the point about figuring out your identity and what you like to do, I think we take for granted why we like to do things we like to do, right? So yes, okay, maybe you would go to the coffee shop, or you would go to Starbucks, or you would go here or there, but it's not necessarily the locations you went to as much as it was what they meant, like what the process of going was, or what you got to do when you got there, or how it made you feel. And digging out what is that exactly is really hard, because we don't often think about that. We just know we like to go to Starbucks, or we like to go here, or we like to go there. We don't often know why we like to do those things, just that we like to do them. And then on the flip side, when you have a lot of time to think about those things, sometimes instead of clarity, you just feel more overwhelmed and confused because you can't get through, this is the thing that I liked, and now I can't do that thing. And it's very hard to separate, well, what did you like about it? And then is there something else that will give you the same feeling, even if it's not going to Starbucks or Denny's or whatever it is, right? Or like, when you were with your friend and you were going to these fancy parties and these events, and even in terms of fashion and all of that triggered a certain feeling for you. And it's trying to figure out what is that feeling, and then can that feeling come from something else that's not that same thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's really hard to figure out.
It is.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really difficult. I think people have asked me before, like, so what are your hobbies? And I'm like, I don't really know what my hobbies are. I like to talk. I mean, I like connecting with people, and I like conversations, and I like to read, and I like to write, and there are like things I like, but I find it difficult sometimes to really dig into, well, what is it exactly about those things that are important to me?
Yeah, exactly.
Next, Becky talks about her part-time job at a marketing company, where she would go to networking events and connect with people on an international level. And while her boss was fantastic, she found that companies are a lot more formal and old school, from the way people are addressed as Mr. last name, and the formal tense that is used versus the casual sense, to what it means to network and be friendly.
For example, in Silicon Valley, everybody knows the rules of networking. Everybody's there friendly, everybody's chatty. There, everybody stares at everybody in a room.
In Germany, people stare?
Like here. I think it's different in major cities, but here in the area, they're old school with PR, sometimes with marketing.
What do you mean, though? Like, give me an example. So
I go to an American-German networking event. People with white hair were just kind of staring. Everybody was wearing suits and very formal. Of course, I was wearing a nice dress. But I said, hey, how are we doing here? Trying to break the ice, chatty. Yeah, and then they're like, oh, who are you? I'm like, and of course I'm talking to them in German. I'm like, oh, should we speak English since this is also an American networking? Yeah. They just kind of give me a funny look. And then I say, oh, I'm from Silicon Valley. Hi, guys.
So would you say it's the norms that are different, right? Like in terms of how people converse and the formality level. My impression of Silicon Valley is that there's a lot of young people there who are in tech, and networking basically looks like having conversations and being super friendly and not being very formal.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right? Whereas in Germany, sort of what you're describing, what I'm hearing is that it's a lot more formal, more old school, and a bit more like people are more reserved in how they communicate with each other, and there is a level of formality that you're sort of not used to, and also maybe not as comfortable with either, because part of networking is connecting with people, which is hard to do when there's a level of formality there. It creates distance, which is the opposite of what you want to be actually doing. So it sounds like the cultural norms are very different. Even though they're both called networking, they look really, really different.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay, so you're doing work that is related to the type of work you were doing, but it looks really different. And also, I think like in North America, being friendly is sort of celebrated, right, as a way to build relationships, especially more now, not everywhere, but I think especially in the cities, there's more of that. Whereas in Germany, it's a lot more like friendliness can seem too casual. Like it can be not inappropriate necessarily, but like you can tell the person's not from here because you wouldn't speak to somebody like that in a casual way because that's not how people speak in that area.
Yeah, or you won't be smiling all the time. I'm always smiling, and I talk loud and I laugh loud. But I listened to We Are Netflix. It's a podcast
Okay.
about the inner workings of Netflix, and they interview everybody that works there, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And they had one recently, how to market to the German audience. And they're talking about the person that's in charge of marketing works in the Netherlands. And he said, yes, Germans are too honest to be polite, right? But then they also said that the British, not the Americans, British are too polite to be honest. I laughed. I laughed when I heard
Americans
that.
fall somewhere in the middle, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
that's interesting to me because it makes me think of two different things. One is that the formality makes certain types of honesty not possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which would go against what that was saying. But then on the flip side, there's a level of bluntness that does come with formality that's more aligned with what you saw on Netflix, in the sense that I'm going to tell it how it is and I'm going to be straight up. It makes me think of like old
Yes.
school corporations where they just said what they thought. You sometimes hear it from older generations now as well, talking about how, have you heard the word the snowflake generation?
I've
Like,
never heard
you've
that.
never heard
No.
that? Okay, so
No.
the snowflake generation is this idea that this generation is offended too easily and by everything. So
Generation X or which
I,
generations?
millennials, I guess.
Yeah, millennials game.
I mean, millennial is such a large group of people, to be honest, right? Like this span,
Yeah.
so much has changed even within the demographic of millennial. But I think it's in reference to millennials. And
Okay.
so they say we're sort of the snowflake generation where we're offended by everything. And so in line with that type of thinking, it's like people should be able to tell it as it is. There's something on your shirt, you did something wrong, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right? So it's coming from that sort of mentality, but at the same time, the type of honesty that's needed to show like weakness or authenticity or to be friendly or put yourself out there, they're not seen as like a part of honesty. It's seen,
Yeah,
right?
no.
Like it's seen more like, oh, you're being too casual for this
Mm-hmm.
conversation or in this environment, which is
Yeah.
kind of very against your identity, really. Because a big part of you, from what you've been describing, is putting yourself out there
Yeah.
and helping people put themselves out there,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in your work or whether it was in your social circles, etc. A big part of it for you was being there, being present, and being yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
if you're now trying to figure out what is yourself in this different context.
Yeah. Okay. Like my new identity in the winter is one thick snow jacket, a hat, a scarf, gloves, and I'm like, I cry because I'm like, because I don't want to wear the same thing every single day. And Yeah, just to keep me warm. I'm like, I want to wear this, I want to wear that, I want to wear this, but I can't because it's cold. And how does one look still fashionable when it's freezing outside? And then nobody cares because everybody's wearing the same darn clothes on the outside too.
It feels like clothing represents something to you.
Well,
It's
yeah.
beyond just the clothes. There's
Oh, good
something,
question.
yeah, because you've brought up clothing in lots of different ways in this conversation, right?
Yeah.
From it being like the thrift store piece, right? To like wanting to dress up and look a certain way and like feeling frustrated by the cold weather, which I get because it's really cold in Canada and
Yeah.
like I hate the winter. So I hear you. I hate wearing layers. I hate that part of it for me. But I think there's something else as it relates to clothing for you. It means something to you.
Oh, I know what it totally means. I think it's my creative outlets because I'm not a painter, I'm not a photographer, but if you give me this cool dress or if I find something that's, for example, went to a thrift store, I found a retro vintage 1980s hot pink Oscar de la Renta wool dress for
Hmm.
$8. So,
Wow.
it's very creative. You pair it with something cool. But then here, if you go to the thrift stores, their purpose is not for donating your goods that you don't want anymore. It's donating your stuff that you've had after 20 years and you're finally upgrading. So it's not a capitalist system society where you're saying, okay, I don't want this anymore, so I'm just going to donate it because I can buy it, something else tomorrow.
It sounds like it's an expression of self.
It
It's
is.
one way you get to show what you're into through your clothing and through
Yeah,
also not looking like everyone else.
exactly.
It sounds like that's also important to you to not blend in the same way. It makes me think of this story the dream that you had about your mom driving away. I think you don't want to be forgotten and you don't want to be neglected. You want to stand out and you want to have a strong purpose, like a reason for being here so that
Yeah.
so that it's important and you're important, right? And
Hmm.
those aspects feed into that feeling for you.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you feel muted, Becky, in all the ways that you would express yourself. So, whether
Mhm.
that's connecting with people or through your clothing or through helping connect with other people, hearing their stories, having them be authentically themselves, none of those things are necessarily valued or appreciated in the same way. They might be,
Mhm.
but it seems like that's not how it feels, at least. And those are
Yeah.
all big parts of what
Mhm.
it meant to be you. It's feeling connected and accepted for who you are and embraced for who you are. And I think you're finding that challenging because who you are is so different from what the norm is that you're
Exactly.
trying to navigate. But you like who you are. So you're
Yeah.
also trying to be like, well, how do I then adjust to being here and integrate to being here, but then also not lose the parts of me that are so
Mhm.
fundamental to how I see myself?
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know, in the last 3 years, what do you feel like has changed for you?
I've grown roots here, and I realized that it doesn't matter where somebody is, the opportunity will always find you, or you can find opportunity. So it's not based on location.
What made you have that realization?
Just calming myself a little bit.
Okay.
I was always trying to beat down the door, trying to make my own opportunity. Then I said it's not working because in Germany you can't make anything you can't make anything happen. They always ask why? Why do you want to make a film? Why do you want to study film? It's like, those kind of things. But I'm doing a short documentary film, which is great. I'm excited. And also, since I'm here, I need to grow roots. Instead of always trying to get out, I said, okay, how am I transitioning? The worm in a cocoon, you have to evolve somehow. And so one time I was driving down the street and I'm like, okay, I'm doing good. I apologized to my friends. And I said to them, I said, ladies, I'm sorry that I was laughing before that we live in the middle of nowhere. Because if I say we live in the middle of nowhere, I'm disrespecting their culture because there's a lot of culture here and a lot of history. And if I say we live in the middle of nowhere, that is just like, painting their hearts, even if they don't say it, totally disrespect. And so I said, hey guys, I forgive me because that is not cool. I wouldn't want anybody to come in my area and say, hey, yeah, this place sucks. They could. I mean, because that's what I was doing. And I said, if I'm calling this place my home, I really need to step up my own game with it, kind of look at what I'm feeling about this area, figuring out why I'm feeling about this area. So now when I talk to people, where do you live? I say, I live in the foothills of the Etzgebirge Mountains, where we have 3 castles within driving, 1 in view, streams of plenty. To the left is where they make the wooden Christmas ornaments that Walt Disney used to collect. And 30 minutes away is where they make the official nutcrackers of
Oh,
Germany. So that's the area. Now, different mindset. And I was patting myself on the back for that, right? I said, hey, that's great, Beck. You are really putting forth effort into this thing called home, right? Then I talking to God, and I said, okay, I'm doing so well, Lord, but what else could I do to integrate a little bit more myself? And everything I saw was, give up your language. It's like the Ariel losing her voice, right?
wow.
But wasn't the voice.
Yeah.
Give up your language to communicate more where they are at. And so I said, okay, this is good. So my German was okay, but it still needed improvement, especially my writing. And then I'm like, okay, I will start listening to things in German and actually try to have a love for it and the people, because that language is connected to the cultural norms, to integration, to saying, okay, I'm not this gal from Silicon Valley, but I'm almost saying I'm from Leibsdorf, I'm from Mittelsaxen.
It's interesting, I think, because sometimes we're so caught up in what we have lost and what is not beautiful that we lose sight of the things that are beautiful, that are great in where we are. And, being homesick. And I think that's what was happening for you. You were really homesick, and it was a huge culture shock, and you couldn't find your footing. Even when you got to places where you thought you would find your footing, it was still uncomfortable. It's like walking in someone else's shoes. The shoes don't quite fit properly, and you're not sure why they don't fit properly, but they don't seem to fit. Whereas
Yeah.
now you're like, okay, these are my shoes.
Mm-hmm.
What socks do I need? Like,
Yeah,
how do
yeah.
what do I need to do to make these work for me? And what's beautiful about these pair of shoes that I'm wearing, and how maybe they're more functional. Maybe they let me do all these things that I couldn't have done in different shoes, right? So it's trying to see the beauty in things as well, even if they're different from what you saw
Yes.
before. And I think too, it's a part of letting go. A part of you felt like, where the heck am I? Like, who are these people? And how come, like, they're so behind with things and all of this sort of stuff? And it's sort of saying, this is where they are, and there's something that's meaningful that comes from where they are. How do I bridge that gap? So
Yeah.
that I blend both for you.
Yeah. Sometimes you get knocked down by the social norms or by the critic or the bluntness.
Yep.
But I think everybody's read the Theodore Roosevelt quote, says, it is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because others is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So I tell people, I said, yeah, it's hard. It is hard. But you have to get back up and go outside, do it again, and figure out the community. And even if someone laughs or it hurts your feelings, still make community with them. Because for me, if someone was too honest, oh yeah, can you please tell me that again? But tell me, like, take 10 minutes to tell me that instead of 2 seconds, and then say, okay.
Hmm.
So I always like that daring greatly because I know like other people that are in this kind of same situation, they're like, oh my goodness, how do you find yourself again and again? And someone says it takes about 3 years to really just say, okay, this is where I am, and make the best out of it.
The quote that you were reading, it's in Brene Brown quotes it too, right? In her book,
Love
Doing
it. I've read
Greatly.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think what I've learned through the story that you've shared and through this experience is you are now putting yourself actually in the ring, right? Without like one foot sort of out of the ring, one foot sort of in the ring, testing the waters, that sort of thing. You're now being like, okay, I'm in the ring and I'm here and I might get knocked down and it might be hard, but I'm going to take whatever steps I need to take to make sure I get back up and look at it for the ring that it is,
Yeah.
instead of like tippy-toeing around what it is. That's amazing. I think it's very hard, and I'm sure there'll be challenges, as everybody has, right? You have challenges that you face in that process. But I look forward to hearing more about your documentary in the future and sort of hearing more about what this journey and process looks for you as you navigate exploring your identity.
Hmm.
So thanks
Absolutely.
for coming out here with us and sharing your story all the way from Germany. Thank you so much for sharing. I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that feeling of trying to find yourself again, where you're in a very different environment than what you're used to, and then how much it takes of letting go, but also accepting where you are and then redefining who you can be. So I'm glad. I'm glad that you're in
Thanks
that
for having
journey.
me.
Thanks for being here. Best of luck. How can people find you if they want to get in touch with you, or how can they find you?
My blog is on hiatus, but I think it's coming back. So the wunderland.de.
Okay.
So we're on Instagram and Facebook. Or if they want to see pictures of home life, my personal Facebook profile is always public.
Do you want to spell your name out for people?
Yeah, sure. It's Becky space Taylor space Hellwig.
Thanks again, Becky. Take
Okay.
care. See you. Bye.
So, my question for everyone is, have you had a similar experience? Have you moved from one country or from one place to a completely different environment? Maybe you're one of those kids who move constantly when you're growing up. And how do you feel like that affected your personality? How do we decide what parts of ourselves to keep and what parts of ourselves to let go as we make those transitions? And is identity really that fluid? Do we simply just choose what to let go, or does it happen a lot more subconsciously? So tell me what you think and let me know about your moving experiences. Until next time, take care.